For those who don't know me, my name is Isabel Catalli, and my practice focuses on how an individual interacts with the objects I make. When designing, I imagine how the object will be approached. How will it welcome its user? What will draw someone in to investigate the surface? What will the user touch first? These are the questions I ask myself when designing an object. My concept is centered around the idea that time and rest are luxuries, as opposed to wealth or status. To me, luxury is captured in the way the work is constructed. Handmade objects can be more luxurious because no two are exactly the same. Every piece is unique. This notion moves my work away from mass production and towards a more sustainable and individualized design process. Luxury is also captured in the materials that I have chosen. Wood, metal, and natural textiles are materials I believe are luxurious because they can be used in their pure and natural form. I have titled my capstone project Luxurist, which means one given to luxury or a lover of luxury. Luxury comes in many different shapes and forms. Luxury can look like an expensive designer item, or it can look like a day off. A luxurist is someone who loves luxury no matter the form. The collection I have designed includes 2 luxurious home furniture pieces. The lounge and cushion represent the luxury of comfort and rest, and the pedestal represents the luxury of time. My capstone project has gone through many stages of how luxury can be brought into our lives through the objects we own. The final objects I have designed are a lounge chair and pedestal. The meaning behind the objects I have designed and made are not determined by just me, but by how the user feels when interacting with these objects. My objectives when I was designing were to use natural materials and use them in a way that seems fluid and purposeful to their natural state. I did not want the materials to seem altered, but rather as if they are meant to be made into the objects they have become. The palette I have chosen to work with is a neutral and clean in color, as well as finish. Strangely enough, the more minimal the design, the more complicated the construction. The need for a minimal design resonates with the luxurious nature of the objects. Something about simplicity lends itself well to the feeling of luxury. The design emanates comfort, allowing for full body relaxation. You are able to rest your head and let the seat cocoon your body. The objects incorporate flowing curves and have a balance of linear structure and full-bodied textile cushioning. The Cocoon Lounge is a low lounge with an ash frame. I wanted the lounge to be monochromatic and light. I chose ash because of its grain pattern as well as its bright, warm color. The frame was made using 2 specific techniques. The seat and back rails, as well as the side rails, were made using bent laminated forms to achieve gestural curves, and the understructure was turned on the lathe. I finished the ash with a Rubio Monocoat 5% white to give it a natural and bright look. To construct the cushion, I chose a heavyweight linen cotton mix in the color twine. The cushion cover is made in 3 parts to create an envelope feature on the back. This allowed me to eliminate any excess hardware such as zippers or buttons. The pillow inserts are able to slip out of the cover if it needs to be washed. And there are 6 straps attached to the cover, and each strap has a gold-plated brass sliding buckle. These straps line up with a recess made on the back of the chair frame to ensure correct placement. Through research, I determined the best way to create human-centered design was to reference the human body. I landed on this pinched cylindrical form. The form references the female figure. The pinch references a waist. The proportions come from a rule of 3, which I find satisfying, and the Venus pedestal could be used in either orientation. The pedestal is also quite small and has just enough space to rest a cup of coffee or a book. I decided to make the Venus pedestal out of a roasted ash. I wanted a contrast from the ash chair, but I also wanted to choose a wood with a similar grain pattern. The roasted ash provided a warm, rich color while still keeping the same grain. The Venus pedestal is turned on the lathe and then surfaced with a router and a hand plane to create a level top. I chose to finish the pedestal with a soap finish. I originally thought oil, but decided against it because of how dark and purple toned it made the wood. The soap finish has a nice matte sheen with a warmer tone. Here are some images from my final photo shoot. I will now open the floor to any questions, comments, critiques, etc. Thank you so much for listening.
Supports the work so well and shows that you have it all up here and you put it all down here, and it's satisfying. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, Carol. Very low.
Connie just said that's a transformative experience sitting in the chair.
You didn't really lower it after, did you? Or I'm extra short, I don't know.
Is this on?
Well, Isabel. I mean, I think you know how I feel at this point, but, and about this, because we've had so much back and forth this year around your process. But the determination of working in such a linear fashion to see what you want to come to fruition has always been something that I've deeply enjoyed here, and I've told you that before. But now, and having gone through this year with you, seeing you have all of the skills and knowledge and language, and then the confidence that accompanies that, to bring that to life in new and meaningful ways is really a great joy to see, and it really paid off. And to have that, as we all have, but I see it so much with you, the confidence that's come, especially this year, and in how you're able to describe, like those before me said, exactly what you've done with the language, and then the assuredness that you've just had all year in your ability to execute this, but not without humility. It's paid off, and this is a beautiful piece and the start of something I think we all know is so much more for Isabel. And we are the founding members of your fan club. I know I'm not just speaking for myself. And yeah, thanks for letting us be part of this journey with you.
Thank you.
Why does this sound like a wedding?
Yeah.
It is very comfortable, Isabel. It's very comfortable. I always follow you, which is hard because your speeches are so good. It's nice to see a group that support each other, and you guys are very close, obviously. It's a lovely chair. It's really, really hard to make a chair, and it's hard to make it, like a real chair, not like a student chair that you made in school and like you're gonna hide it in a corner. Like this is a real chair that you can live with, and that's really hard to do. So fantastic job. I think it looks amazing. I love your description of luxury. It's something that this year at work we've been kind of talking about. What does luxury mean? And I think this year a lot of things, a lot of ethical issues, a lot of sustainable things came up that is making everybody think. And as someone in the luxury business, like we're constantly thinking, like, how can we redefine that? So it just doesn't mean making everything out of like pure stone or, slap some gold and brass on it and call it a day. So I really love your kind of thinking about what's luxury. We talked about kind of something looking good from all angles before, and the back of this chair also looks really beautiful. It's also very comfortable. When I sat in it, I was kind of torn because you can really feel all the kind of different cushions. Mm-hmm. I couldn't decide if that's a bad thing, but it was also like a massaging my back. So it's like I was a little bit torn about that. And the only thing is, and I noticed you kind of allowed some space where you actually sit and your butt goes so that your butt's not hitting that flat. But I feel like the spacing needs a bit of work because you kind of get stuck in it. And again, I'm like getting into the nitty gritty of things, just because this is, we're trying to help you here. So yeah, I think it's an amazing accomplishment, but there's definitely kind of things that you can think about is that spacing. And then when you get out of it, the cushion still kind of gets stuck. Like if you can see, Peter just sat there. It's just working on the spacing a little bit more. And these are things that it's harder, without having a support of the fabricator and stuff. But you can also look into the density of the foam to kind of get that comfort. But with all that said, again, I'm getting nitpicky here. I think it's an amazing chair. You've done an amazing job. It's really comfortable. The table is also really beautifully done. And, the trick is always like, you need to make something that's familiar, but it has something new. Because I feel like if you make something completely new, then people are not going to relate to it. So the trick is that balance of like what's familiar and what's new and what you're adding to it. But lovely job.
Thank you so much.
I haven't sat in it yet, but looking at the straps and buckles makes me happy, because when, not just that, but like they're thick and secure, and everybody knows those like kitchen or dining room chairs that somebody's put a cushion on and they've tied a little string to the two of the slats, and it just makes you anxious that it's gonna break or slide off. And like outdoor furniture, there's just like a loose Velcro strap around the back. There's the security, it's like takes away the anxiety, which adds to the luxury in relaxation.
I do agree with Bahar about the spacing, and I've always been looking at this because again, I'm often like good furniture looks good from all sides, and obviously it's always going to have the cushion on it, but when you see the cushion off, I would like the slatting to be equally spaced. You can't really see it because it's underneath.
Yeah.
But if you worked on it until you found the right spacing, do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, there was a lot of testing on where those slats would go, and
or is it like two in a larger space and two, like just something that would be visually satisfying just in the frame itself,
of course.
And then this is a really minor criticism, but given that you do rely on the slats, I'm not sure if you needed to notch it in because the cushion.
Yeah.
But I do wish you considered where the ends are going, just because the chair is so refined. I don't know. Maybe others don't agree, but I like, is there another buckle to thread it through? Do they just not need to be quite as long?
That was an aesthetic choice to leave them long.
It was? Okay. Yeah. You like the straps? Okay. There you go. And then I know you wanted always to show the little bit of the frame with the cushion, but I think I would make the cushion bigger, like a little bit bigger, because when people are sitting in it, like, I think it's just better to have it a little oversized even, than having trying to precisely show the frame, and I think more cushion, because cushion is quite luxurious, and the fabric choice is lovely. That's a good point, Kristen, because I think right now your cushions are basically the same size as the opening in the slat. So if you play around with that, then it's not going to get stuck on that so easily if you make that play with that distance. And I might as well just keep going since I'm holding this thing, but like I do wish one day you make your ottoman, when you don't have to listen to Peter and I, the individual ottoman. Because the side table goes really lovely, and the contrast between the two pieces, yet the simplicity, they speak really well to each other. So what is the third piece? Because it would be nice to see that individual unique third piece. Isabel did not want to make a matching ottoman, even as much as we tried to encourage her to. She did not want to do that. And there are other things that I think you could further explore, like with the shaping of stuff, but I mean, they're minor, and it's quite lovely.
Yeah, for sure.
I think it's very commendable, the scale of this chair and the amount of work that has gone into it. All these parts, these laminated curved parts, they've all come together beautifully. I would agree with the spacing issue, but how many chairs have you made?
Yeah. I mean, this is
You
the
know,
second
so-
one.
Yeah. So, you know, it's, I think you've really come up with a great rendition of a lounge chair. The table, it's actually so simple, but it's actually quite a difficult piece to make, wasn't it? To laminate it and then to turn it as cleanly as you have. It's, somebody said it earlier about the simple things are actually the harder things to make. And sometimes the simplest things also show that luxury that you're after, right? And that can be difficult to achieve. But I think you've made it look pretty effortless with that form and the fineness of it as well. You called it what? Roasted ash?
It's roasted ash,
Oh,
yes.
okay. I wasn't familiar with that.
Yeah, I mean, me neither until this year.
Yeah, I've seen roasted maple, which is kind of similar. Has a nice luxurious quality to it as well. And that's the other thing. It's like taking a simple material like ash and making it a luxurious material, right? So it's not always easy to do. You chose the right finish as well. Typically, ash can look really kind of yellowy and, you know, kind of drab. But this has got a nice touch and feel to it, which is very important when you're sitting in a chair. Getting out of the chair is difficult, right? Especially for us older people.
Yeah, it's very low.
Yeah, it takes a lot of oomph to get up, right? Yeah. But yeah, it's quite an engineering feat. Yeah, congratulations.
Thank you. When you presented your concept in December, I thought, oh, Isabel's making a comfortable lounge chair. Yeah. And the kind of extension into luxury, I didn't really see how you were going to express that in a meaningful way through a lounge chair, but sitting in that, it's really an amazing experience. I mean, spacing aside, it's a different kind of lounge chair. So I think you've done a really great job carrying through in that in a way that I just couldn't have foreseen it being, you sort of connecting all those dots so well in terms of visual form, in terms of comfort, in terms of materials. But I'm all for the ottoman. In the future, it's coming. It's coming. Yeah. Thank you.
I think it could be cool if you do the ottoman, you know.
Yeah.
And then if you change the proportions of the cushion on the chair, just so that they're a little bit different, because I know you don't want them to be totally matching. Like I think a really wide cushion, like that extends past the chair, could be really interesting. And then you could, I don't know, maybe this isn't necessary, but you know, it could be cool.
Yeah, I think what you were talking about luxury, I think captivated us all from the start, because you are such an economical person, both in scale and the way you approach the world, that luxury somehow seems like it might be something that you might not value in that same level. But I think what you've come up with here is the concept of luxury really relies on craft and the way you handle materials and the way you approach every detail. And the fact is that you're an extremely detail-oriented person. There's no stone that is left unturned. And the control you have even over your sketchbook, which we've talked about many times, is kind of legendary. And I have to say, I really wish I'd seen some of that in your process document, because that to me is who you are, is this grid of ideation drawings that are so carefully considered and put in their place. And that's what gets presented when you complete an object as well. There's a sense of luxury in this Venus pedestal because of the material choice, obviously, and also the understated reference to the body, which is a big part of the rest of your project, which you talked about, you know, gesture in the body and a lot of other things that that got you to this point. So the presentation you gave today, you know, as David mentioned, was extremely concise. It was also very technical and somehow was missing some of the ways you conceptually got to where you are. And I know that's all in there. But I think the whole issue about luxury is, you know, it's about rest, certainly, and that's a nice conceptual way to hang it. But it's also about that craft and attention to detail. And one of the things that I really love about this is the attention you paid to the upholstery. You were more aware of the upholstery before you were even aware of the final form of the piece. And to have those things considered as a unit and as thoroughly as you did is really, I think, very impressive. And you spent 4 years getting to this point. You're still, you know, the youngest graduating member of this class, if I'm not incorrect. Jordan? Okay, Jordan, you're like a week apart or something. I don't know. But the detail of the two folds of the fabric where they come together at the outside edge and just allow them to flutter a little bit, you know, those kind of details, I think, speak volumes. The ridges of the upholstery and the way it sort of crinkles a little bit, how it does have a reference to the slats, you know, for better or worse, depending on, you know, what the shape of you is. Conceivably just a different shape of the bent lamination there, like a slightly deeper lamination. Those are the refinements that you would take to put a piece like this in production. But Bahar's quite right. I mean, this ain't no student chair. And so now you have the responsibility to take it to the level at which it has directed you to. So it's, yeah, it is inspiring to see someone who is so steadfastly concerned about their own direction, so much so that you're willing to ignore your advisors, and that's totally cool. So one of these days we'll see an ottoman, but it's not going to be the one that I would want, and that's quite okay. Anyway, nice work.
Thank you.
I hate presenting. So just gonna start with that. Anyway, you can see here, my project is called Subjective Furniture. And that was just like through the whole rigmarole of trying to find some theoretical background to base my project on, me getting frustrated with justifying aesthetics and like having to do that for some reason, and to me it being more about just the subjective nature of the way that things make me feel and how it's not really explainable, and that I kind of value when I can tell that somebody truly likes something, even if they just say that they like it, over some fancy language that doesn't come across as true to me. So that's kind of where it came about. And then it's kind of like I came here 4 years ago because I thought that paying to go to school would force me to like get my butt into gear and force myself to learn what I want to learn and make the things that I want to make that I procrastinate on in my other daily life, and I didn't know that this project was gonna end up there. I started the year trying to justify a completely pragmatic approach to the project and saying I want to use this project to learn some machining skills or something like that. And then it completely went off the rails from there. And then I didn't know that this was what I was going to design in the end, but then it did end up like taking, like, I was just slogging for weeks and weeks, 10 to 12 hours a day, just learning new stuff that I did want to learn, and working hard and learning and having fun and fixing things and troubleshooting, which is all stuff that I love to do. So here is the rendering when I was done the design stage before I started building. That was required in the presentation to tell how similar the final product is to the design. So that, I think it's pretty close. Anyway, so some of my design process here, I really wanted to bring forth the subjective nature in this project that I get from the things that inspire me to make the most, which are antiques and old tools and old machinery. And some of the ways that I was going to do that just by creating and designing on that pure inspiration, and just letting it take me where it will, along with deliberately bringing in heavy duty materials like the wood and the steel and the leather, and things like some sort of functioning mechanism, and some aspects of specific tools like these screwdrivers that I have, that the handles are wood fixed to the steel with two steel pins that you can see on the legs there. And so when I wanted to get into it and get designing the mechanism part, this is when I came to getting a reclining chair. And on the screen here, you can see my initial drawings were 3 different ways that I might use the armrest extending to be a way for the backrest to move and adjust. So I've got at the top the spring-loaded plunger, which is actually the one that I ended up going with, and a locking cam lever, and then a thumb screw mechanism. And I went with this one because the most straightforward and the one that was most likely to work out. And then I moved on from there in the actual design. So these are my CAD drawings of 3 of the major parts that are inside of the wooden piece and the armrest. And maybe I can just take this off. Oh. This thing got caught on my back. Sorry. Actually, I have to. So that's how that works. So these just slip down on there, and you can see this piece here is the first one there, and then there's a pin that holds the second piece in place in the slot so that it can't, I'll actually move that so you guys can see. So I'm pulling the pin out of one of the holes on this side and then sliding it back, and then this pin inside the slot keeps it from going too far back so that you don't fall out the back or break anything. And then at the front, it stops it from going too far.
Josh, it would be nice when we have the camera back to show this for anyone online, because right now we're sharing screen just with your presentation. So we'll come back to that as well. That's great.
Yeah, I will come back to that. Yeah, so moved from the ideation phase and figuring out the mechanisms in my head, and then using SolidWorks to make a theoretically working example that would fit into a design. And there's the wooden armrest piece that fits around everything. And then here's part of the making process. I used a milling machine to do the slot and some of the holes. And then that's my forge in the middle, where I had bought large ball bearings to use as the handles for those plungers. And then I didn't think about it, but obviously they were hardened. So I went to drill into it the first time, and my bit just like burnt up in like a 32nd of an inch. So I threw those in the forge to temper them, anneal them so that they were soft, and then I could drill and tap the holes and thread.
It's worth explaining that this is all at your own farm workshop.
Yes.
So this is stuff that you've undertaken as an exploratory process on your own.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the learning. So just so that everyone knows.
Yeah, and then the knowledge about like metallurgy in the forging sense of annealing hardened steels and stuff, that's just because I've been doing blacksmithing as a hobby for like 6 years or something like that. But the other stuff, the machining and using the metal lathe, has been like, I just got those machines and restored them over the COVID summer, and they're completely new to me, and it's taken a lot of trial and error, and it's been fun and frustrating, but mostly fun. So this is some detail shots. That's obviously the whole armrest that you're seeing there up close, how it turned out. And then this spring here is what's supposed to push the front forward. So this is one of the mistakes I had along the way that I wasn't able to recover from by crit time. I had larger springs that had more coils and a thicker wire, so they were stronger, and they would seat into this hole that you can see on the frame there. And those are the same gauge of spring that I had in my previous mock-up, which we all knew would fly up and like slap and make a loud noise. I ruined one, so I didn't have a matching opposing set to use on either side. So I scrounged up what I could from the farm and made some smaller ones, and they're not strong enough. So I made this little hook piece to add on to it after the fact, just to bend it extra, to give it that extra spring force forward. And then this is a little detail you can see on the legs where on the side frames where the stretchers come through. I peened the steel over, cold forged it with a ball peen hammer to spread it out and like keep it in like a mortise and tenon in wood, but in the steel version, so there's no welding, no adhesives, no set screws or anything like that. And that's just sort of like an ode to the old world steel manufacturing techniques. There's all of my parts laid out on the leather that I ended up making the upholstery from. That was a fun picture to set up and take. And there's the final, which you see there. So I should close this. Is that what's going on, Peter? Okay, great. All right.
I just want to be the first to say, I love how you have stuck to your concept of almost like anti-design design, even though, you know,
I haven't put this back in yet, so.
The other professors have been kind of opposed to it, how you really stubbornly refuse to talk about why you do the things that you do. But that has kind of led us to this place that just makes so much sense to us because we kind of know you as a person now. And I think that takes a lot of courage and tenacity. So good job on that.
Thank you. And yeah, it's still not functioning quite well. I haven't had the time to grease everything and do all the little fiddly bits. Is not done. Obviously, you can see on the legs, the pins are still sticking out. They're meant to be filed flush to the shape of the legs. I don't have a finish on the leather or the wood, but I'm getting there. So yeah, that won't actually come back up on its own because there's too much friction in the system right now. In a hole.
So I think it's just like really nice to have someone in the program, and I assume you know what I mean here, as this is a compliment, that has such a like kind of a knack for approaching failure. You know what I mean? Like just like going into something and being willing to work through every single ground out detail is hard. And I'm just wondering, like, because you said there was so much troubleshooting and failures and ultimately successes, like what was the biggest challenge that was the most satisfying to overcome?
I may not have even overcome it yet, but this is also my most in-depth project 3D design-wise, making every single part in SolidWorks, and then you have these like ultra accurate drawings of everything, and then you go to make it in the real world, and you're an amateur machinist, and you're also using an old CNC router, and the calipers at the CNC are bent, and then you don't measure the bit just exactly right, and then the tolerances aren't exactly right and everything like that. And you've just gotta like, there's so much more room actually needed for all the imperfections that are gonna come out of it. And there's only so many of those things that you can think about before you get to them. So I knew that I would really like hate to have to chisel out the inside of the arms again, even after I made them in two pieces on the CNC and then glued them together. And then I'd go to put them down on top of the other arm parts, and then it's not wide enough. And then that would just be like, I give up, or I'm making a new arm or something, right? So I had thought about that already, and I deliberately added a 32nd of an inch for the router to take away, and it fit perfectly. But then on the outside path, like the outside of the tool path, then that was still exactly the spec. So then everything didn't fit in that dimension. I had to grind a bunch of the metal parts down way further than they were supposed to be. So, yeah, don't, I don't know what the advice is there. So that one's not clicking in, obviously. Yeah. I don't know.
I'm trying to think of what it reminds me of. And
A bolt action rifle.
no, I don't like rifles, but it's something futuristic, and yet it's so dated with hand forging techniques and stuff like that. It's got this what's that movie with Harrison Ford and Ridley Scott? Blade Runner. Yeah, it's got a Blade Runner feel to it somehow, and I don't know why.
I'll take it.
Yeah, it's interesting to see this much metalwork done. There used to be a lot of metalwork being done by furniture students quite a few years ago, before it went to a degree program. And like you, the majority of people that jumped into it had no experience doing metalwork. A lot of casting metals and then machining and using whatever we had to get things done, right? But this is kind of, for like your first attempt in using a milling machine and everything, it's pretty well crafted.
Thank you. These were cut out by a water jet, the two
Yeah,
side pieces, but everything else I made.
Yeah, I figured that. Yeah. So you use the lathe and whatnot, right? As well as the milling machine. Yeah, I mean, it's until you actually do it, it can sometimes be hard to appreciate how much work it goes into it. I've always shied away from it. I've always enjoyed seeing what people come up with. The leather work then goes in another direction. The way that you did the sliding mechanism for the arm is quite interesting. That's kind of engineering in effect, right? And this spring thing, I understood what you were talking about, but I don't. Can you get a larger spring of that kind of form, or do you have to make that yourself?
You have to order it special, or you can make it yourself. I'm not hardening things at the degree of precision you need for a spring. I can make a knife that holds an edge, but making a spring, you need like a digital kiln to be able to get everything properly tempered.
And I was kind of curious about the wood legs. At first I thought, oh, there's an opportunity to maybe do some casting, metal casting. You could farm it out, make the form yourself, and get it done someplace like Scare or whatever. But you wanted to incorporate wood into those legs. That was from the get-go one of your design intentions.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because the arms and the rationale behind them kind of works for me. I'm not so sure about these. They almost that torpedo shape. It's kind of intriguing. I like the pins that come through here, right? And the way you kind of resolve it. But to me, it looks like it could almost be for some reason. I don't know. That could just be me. It's quite a feat.
That's one of those things that I was advised against a lot, and it was like not doing them.
Okay, well, you did them.
The leg shape, like extending to those points instead of flowing into the frame or whatever.
Can I wade in here and just say that it's not Rob that is confused by that. It's that you didn't describe well enough in your presentation the beautiful connection between the wood and metal that you have brought into this whole concept that deals with old tools and that perfect relationship. And that's what that leg was about. You talked about knife scales and metal, and to have shown one image of that screwdriver in your presentation, Rob would have gone, oh, that's where that comes from. That's perfect.
Yeah, I do see that.
Yeah, and all I mean is, like, we know this because we know you and we know the obsessions and the interests, and those are the things that make it beautiful in our understanding. But you do, and I know you hate presenting, but there's a point at which you got to say, this is what this piece is about, and this is what I want to bring forward. And so that whole concept of the way a knife meets the handles of the wood handle, or a screwdriver is worn but shows its materiality, like that's what this piece is all about. And that's what, regardless of visually what's happening, that's the magic that you've pulled off with this marriage of materials.
That's what I'm responding to as well. Right? What I would like to see is stitching on the leather,
That was the original plan to stitch.
I saw that in your image there, yeah. I think that would go a long ways. I do find these rivets a little cheesy compared to the fineness of the.
There were some that would have been necessary, like these ones here. So from here to here, and then
Yeah,
here.
with some good stitching, like block stitching and reinforcing, you might be able to get away from that.
Well, yeah, I just meant, okay, yeah, you're probably thinking of actually completely fixing it on with stitching. The thought of the leather upholstery originally, and still, because it's removable, was that it would be sort of a sheath. And so would have been a pocket on the top and at the bottom. And then anytime that it came past somewhere where it had to break around a segment of the frame, that's when it then had to have a flap and then like removable fasteners.
There's another leather forming technique where you use vegetable tan leather, thick leather, and you can form it. You can actually mold it more or less to the shape you want, and then also stitch it wherever you want. Which would lend itself nicely to this as well.
You could have still, with the rivets, sewn the pockets of the top and bottom. And you could have probably still fit it on, right? Like, because you'd have extra over the center before you bent it out. Just because on the back side, the corner folds seem very unresolved, by comparison to sort of the level of detail you put into the mechanics. Like it's one area that I think could have benefited from some more exploration.
Yeah, I only got to this at like 6 p.m. yesterday, the leather, so just it. I kind of redesigned it to fit the timeline for this part. I wanted people to be able to sit in it and for it to be close. But yeah.
I also actually, on the top of the chair, I sort of missed, and I think with, again, a sewn pocket or maybe even some shaping of the leather, you just had a bit of a nicer seat shape, in your original. I think, was it curved at the top? Or
I had the
curved in the back?
radiuses in the corner, yeah.
And just little details like that, I think, bring it to a level, that's equal to the arm. Like the arm, I think, which was a struggle because the arm has got to achieve a lot. There's a lot of mechanics going on in the arm. And I think that is one of the best resolutions in the chair to me, is the shape of the arm that you landed on. Whereas I don't mind the method of joining of the legs, but I still find the leg shape a little bit arbitrary. Like I just don't understand. I see your like other work that you've done that has that shape in it. So I can see it makes sense for you from that point of view, but within the context of this chair, I'm not sure I follow the decision to keep that shape of legs. And then I'm just curious, not mechanically, don't answer this question with a mechanical answer, but if you were going to do another iteration of the chair, what would you change?
Visually.
Visually.
A very simple change that I knew like weeks ago would just be even keeping the legs the same general shape, but that's the thing, that the arm would never have been that shape if the legs hadn't have already been that shape. And then I had to make the arm big enough to fit all the mechanics inside without the wood getting too thin and all that. So then it's sort of a disproportionate size. It's trying to keep a similar shape to the legs, but then it's now a little extra bulk, but there's no way that I'm making that smaller. So then just making the legs bigger could bring them up to a more proportionate size. That would be a small change, make them closer to the arm shape. I love it. maybe an inch taller.
Pretty cool chair. It's like an ancient robot or a transformer or something. And I can see you talked about, you know, you're not the type of person who would have like a crazy concept behind your design. I don't think everyone has to be like that. I don't think I'm like that. But and a lot of times it's not like you're following your piece around in the world with an artist statement. I feel like the piece speaks for you. I think the chair has a lot of attitude, which is nice. The detail work is incredible. Like I can't even believe how, you know, what it took to figure out the arm mechanism. And I love kind of that reference to the knife handle, the tools on the legs. But it also kind of looks like an animal, like it's like a little creature almost, which is cool. I think it's nice when furniture has that life to it. So yeah, I really appreciate your passion and like kind of sticking with what you were interested in, what you wanted to kind of experiment with, and you did that. And I think the results are successful. Yes, some things need more polishing, but we can always improve that after this crit. I think it's an important point to like make sure people can sit on it for the crit and stuff like that. And it is pretty comfortable. I want to sit on it again. But I would also like to see, because when you were showing us the arm, you said we would show it on camera. I would love to see it again on like what the inside mechanism looks like.
Yeah, I'll set that up. And then that was a detail that I noticed that I forgot to talk about. Should I man a camera and point it at it or something?
The camera's pointed at.
I'll do it like that, and then people will see. Okay, but then, yeah, I'll just talk about that one thing first. Was the project that inspired the leg shape was a stool I made in second year, and that was my first like main welding project. And there were a lot of visible welds all over the place that I didn't mind then, and now they bug me. And I really wanted to stay away from that. So I spent a lot of time machining these bits at all of the joints that made it so that I could slip all of the parts together and weld them only from the areas that aren't visible, whether it be inside of a hole or only from the back. So as that, anyway, yeah, I'll get one of these.
As you're doing that, I think it's interesting, this whole project along, that you've been resistant to this idea of aesthetics, when this chair is a chair, yes, mechanically driven, that has a very strong aesthetic.
Mm-hmm.
The decisions that you are making are aesthetic.
I don't think I should have chose the Britney Spears. Okay, so yeah, I'll pull this out too. So the ball pulls out and retracts the plunger in the end there, and it's spring loaded, and that'll sit through here into any of the holes and hold it in the position that you want. And then this pin that rides inside, that's attached on the inside of this piece, keeps it from extending too far back, so you don't damage the chair or fall backwards or anything like that, or too far forward. So that was that.
I have a question for Josh. This is from Lee. You mentioned your reason for joining the program were to partly to keep yourself motivated towards your aspirations of continuing to learn to make things. And you obviously have great skill and ability to tackle new ways of making and learning new techniques. So I'm wondering how you feel now, having advanced your methods and added to your repertoire. Have your feelings of being motivated changed? That is from Lee.
I'm glad that I did it. I definitely don't regret any of the past 4 years at all, and I'm even super happy to have done it, even if it didn't serve the purpose that I originally wanted for the people that I met here. And being connected with all of these great people as well, coming from a small town and not spending really any time in the city and getting new frames of mind that I can bounce things off of, has helped me grow as a person and understand more of the reasons why I might procrastinate and have trouble doing things as well. So I'm just better at that stuff in general now, 4 years later. Maybe not because of forcing myself to do things, but because of other reasons, but because I came here for 4 years. So yeah, it's all positive, and yeah.
I love the fact that you're an inveterate tinkerer. You're almost unapologetic and irredeemable in that level, and you do all the things that that we'd love to be able to do if we all had the single-minded attention and time and access to those things. And that's why I wanted to, make it clear that you're sort of exploring all these things independently in some levels, because unfortunately, as Rob mentioned, we don't have the ability to provide for that kind of level of involvement. So as a test case, it's great to see that. It doesn't surprise me that you're essentially, living a farm life on some level, because you approach things like a farmer. It's sort of like, I'm going to approach this with what I've got, and I'm going to do the best I can, and it's going to last as long as it needs to. But you've polished that farm tech in the time that you've been in the program to a really heightened level. And I know you kick against rationalization and explanation because you seem to think it's antithetical to the final value of the project, and you are so wrong. It's so much part of it. And to be able to carry out something like this with warts and all, you talk about you don't like the fact that the arms are as big as they are because of the mechanism. I love the feeling of sitting in that chair with my arms resting on those arms, and the scale is perfect. I think there are glimpses of where you break through that, reticence that are really kind of stellar as well, and very thoughtful. And it's, I don't know if there's a 12-step program for, people that, should talk more lucidly about their work. But, I'd love to sign you up, and I will be your mentor, It's because if you can achieve this, and still not think it's worth talking about, and maybe that's putting words in your mouth, but I think it's a remarkable achievement, polishing this thing to the stage you got it at. And I just don't want to see the people not take it seriously because you're not willing to talk about it in the way it deserves. And there's probably a lot more to talk about. And what I would really like to do is just come and hang out in your barn someday when we can do this, and drink a bunch and hit metal, and you can then start explaining what this is all about.
You're invited.
Okay, that would be great.
I've told Mac that I would invite you to do that at some point, and he thought it was weird.
I think that's probably all for comments, but I have one here from Simon, Simon Ford, who had to leave. He says, unfortunately, I have an appointment that I have to get to. This goes to everybody, but I just wanted to express a few things to this talented cohort. Having started teaching at Sheridan 4 years ago, this is the first class that I've watched move through the program from beginning to end. It has been a real joy and satisfaction watching you all develop into the designers that you are today and your own very unique ways. Congrats on the very impressive work that you have presented today, and I look forward to seeing you where the world takes you as you graduate from this program. Good luck and best wishes. Very nice way to end. All right, thank you so much, Josh.
Thank you.
So my name is Jordan Barr, and this is my project titled Still Objects. So I'm just going to kind of start with a starting place to where my mindset was at entering this project a year and a bit ago now, which would have been at the height of kind of COVID lockdown and whatnot. So I really had this reflection on the home office space and kind of the furniture and mindsets that go along with it. So reflecting upon my own office at home, I found I was spending so much time there and I was finding it to be a really stale environment. And I felt like it was somewhere that could be used in a different way with a kind of a different approach to get more meaningful work out of, and somewhere that I would enjoy working from. And instantly my mind from being stuck at home went to, well, I wish I was in the studio. I wish I was in a workplace, because for me personally, that's where I feel connected and I feel at home, and I can kind of work off these furniture typologies from the studio. And I was wondering, how can I bring that perhaps into a home environment and grow from there? And I was also approaching it from this angle of wabi-sabi and the mundane, and kind of these ideas about little moments throughout the day that I find so peaceful and have so much joy to them. When you kind of catch a little thing or you do something silly but pleasurable, and that kind of centers you within the day. And I found those really beautiful moments that I wanted to include into furniture, especially into a space like a home office that can be so incredibly stressful. So one of the early things I worked on was a material study, and I was really fascinated with materials that reflected how they're used through patinaing, and that could kind of be a story as to who used them and how they use them. So I did a bunch of metal patinas and leather molding, and seeing how leather took marks from writing on it and putting coffee cups on it. And I worked with sandblasting of wood to get these really worn, distressed wooden forms that were transparent and translucent. And the studies really helped me find this connection I felt so powerful between user and object, and trying to encourage use and encourage patina to reflect who uses those objects. And so I wanted to carry that into my work, but I did realize that I didn't want to force it like these experiments, where I wanted it to be a natural connection between person and object. I also did a study in film photography, which is just something I'm interested in, and kind of photographing all these things in my walk to school and whenever I could walk, and finding kind of, what were these moments that I found peaceful, that I found still, that I thought would be valuable in an office or in furniture. And a lot of that came from patterns and textures and materials and nature. And so I tried to bring that into my work. So as a whole, Still Objects is an alternative interpretation of the home office, inspired by the studio and workshop environments. The collection embraces the inevitable passing of time and wearing of materials to create intimate connections between object and user. Through an appreciation for the simple and mundane moments of the day, Still Objects encourages reflection and meditation in what can be traditionally a stressful space. For this, I kind of outlined these 4 design criteria, being longevity, production, function, and stillness. And I'm going to kind of go through them as they relate to the specific piece so I can explain them. So first up was kind of longevity, both in a sense of items or objects that last a long time because they're well built, but also understanding how these natural materials react to time and working with that rather than against it to create something that was kind of going to strengthen over time rather than deteriorate. So the main connection to this is it's technical and whatnot, but a dovetail joint that houses, or that is between the leg structure and the top, which allows the top to drop on and lock in. And it creates this connection that is very sturdy between the legs and the top, but also keeps the top flat. And even as that top kind of expands and contracts as wood does, it it almost strengthens itself over time instead of loosening and kind of wearing itself apart. And if it ever does wear out, it can be knocked forward and locked in. Something I felt was kind of important to the lifespan of an object beyond when I consider it finished and handed to a client. Likewise, that kind of led into ideas of production. So keeping an attention to the simplicity of process of making and how kind of pieces could be like this could be recreated in a future production sense, perhaps batch production model for my personal future. And that coupled with the dovetail joint from the previous slide led to creating the desk that was completely knocked down. It's kind of held together with 6 bolts and 4 major components, and can be disassembled and flat packed and shipped, which lends itself to being kind of a viable model for production. Third was function. So first and foremost, it is a desk and it needs to be functional. It needs to be logical in an office and can allow for multiple different types of work. So I created this desktop storage system that was inspired by some old European workbenches that flush mounts to the top and has a series of sliding lids and a sliding tray in there. Now it's not in the photos, but you can come up and look, take a peek. And that is what houses all your kind of utensils and daily tools and replaces what would be a drawer. So in this way, there's much more leg room and open space and less components to the entire desk. And lastly was this concept of what I've been defining as stillness or mundane moments that I wanted to bring into this work to center the user and create this meditative type environment. So part of that came to fruition through looking at nature and bringing nature in. So I worked with Christina from ceramics to design these pots, one of which sits flush in the table surface where one of the trays are, and others that are just sit on the edge, but bring this greenery and bring this nature into the space. And secondly was this lamp called the KO lamp that sits on the edge of the desk, and it pivots along its center axis there and has this really gentle movement to it, which reacts to the environment around it. So when wind blows or when someone walks by and bumps the desk, the light kind of gently centers itself and is this nice moment you can catch periodically to kind of recenter yourself and say, oh, that was lovely, as you watched it slowly come to a halt and then return to work. So that leads me to the final pieces. So first I have Giro desk here. As I described, it's kind of a workbench for the home. And then I have KO light, which is a light for thought or a light for meditation and for use as well. Just a quick note about the light. This is not very important that it's totally explained, but the way it works is that these 2 metal rods here are actually what is conducting the electricity. And so it comes in through the bottom structure, through the rods, and can be received by the lighting unit itself. And it can be simply turned off first and then twisted, moved, and relocated to wherever's desired. And then in good fashion, as a lot of my projects do involve, I have one photo of my cat.
Josh, can the light go right to the top of that rod? Does it still stay balanced?
Yeah, to here?
No, to the top.
To the top, yeah. It does benefit from being turned off just because you lose a bit of the conductivity of it, but it can go to the top. It does kind of find a little bit new center spot, but it does.
Okay, great.
Can go wherever.
Yeah, I think the nice thing about the way the arc has provided that angle is that it creates it becomes more parallel to the axis of the desk as you move it up, whereas you can create a more raking angle as you move it down.
Exactly, yeah. And that was kind of the problem with previous designs, is that it was only one option. So. The back structure there. So it's there's 2 bolts coming in through the edge of the leg, and then these are cross dowels that are threaded. these brass pins.
Yeah, I just asked him how the back stretcher attaches. And there's
Yeah.
a couple of bolts that go into brass dowels.
Yeah.
To help hold it in so it could be disassembled for flat packing.
Mhm.
And this dovetail that's under the top, that was your own design?
It was, was originally going to do some more standard sliding dovetail that would enter from one side and be capped on the other side. This was kind of a Peter's suggestion, which I took forward. So yeah, it goes straight down and then pushes forward.
I like the brass finger.
Thank you.
Uh,
And I should say too, the lids are reversible so that the opposite side is just flat wood. And then the grain is one piece of wood from here to the lids to the other side. So it does line up too. Thank you.
Beautiful detailing on your lamp. The way everything is carefully thought out. These are brass rods?
That's right, yeah. And there's theoretically a dimmer. You're just gonna have to use your imagination as it gets dimmer and then brighter.
Okay. Yeah.
There's some issue going on there that I haven't quite resolved, but.
And this kind of breaks the movement.
Right.
Lovely.
So the light was a first for me. I've never worked with lighting before, and it was a lot more work than I had originally intended. So it has some kind of tweaks that needs to be done to it. But it's fun.
It's like one of those ducks that dip in the water.
The dippy birds.
Yeah, it definitely has a very rudimentary bench feel, but I think that the transitions from one part to another are really phenomenal. They really elevate the piece and take it from something that's just, a rectilinear, simple rectilinear form to something much more sophisticated. The just very subtle shaping, the way the parts sort of partially wrap around the other part that they're meeting. And of course, the brass details, just the combination of leather and brass and wood and some ceramic. That's really what takes this piece to another level. We had Kate Duncan in on Tuesday for cabinetry, and she talked about how she had developed a product line and it had kind of fallen flat, and she ended up sort of going back to the drawing board and doing a bunch of research, and had found that what she was seeing in her research was that a combination of materials and material accents is really what was elevating price points in furniture.
Okay.
And that's what drove her to start incorporating metal and leather accents in her pieces. And that as soon as she did that, she saw a lot of success and higher price points in her work. So just interesting to see, given that she, just had sort of stated that during the critique, to see that incorporated here, I guess.
That's good news.
Good news, yeah. But I mean, the plants are more than a backdrop for this, right? I mean, they seem pretty integral.
Yeah, I would
to
like
the piece.
them to kind of grow from it.
I think that making that ceramic, including those ceramics for that specifically, is pretty important for this piece for all of those factors that you talked about to come together. So yeah, I really admire the way you've been able to bring all of those qualities you talked about into one piece that's so seemingly utilitarian and functional, but through small gestures, it's been really elevated into a very quiet yet phenomenal piece.
Thank you.
Just wanted to say I'm getting sentimental now because, but I don't mean to bring up again you and Isabel being the youngest, but we've gotten to see you also grow as individuals. Not that none of us have it as well, but there's a big jump that happens during that age, I think. And it's been really special watching that happen with you personally, and then also having you grow as a designer. And you're already such a good maker when you started, but now you're even more amazing. And the way that you approach designing and making is you're so calm and steadfast, and it's so inspiring for someone like me who is the opposite of that to watch. And it's been a pleasure being with you for this past 4 years. I'll miss you.
Likewise.
He has a really quiet maturity and maybe an old soul, and I don't mean that.
I've heard that a few times, yeah.
Okay, I need to know how old you and Isabel now are. Everyone's been talking about it.
We're 22.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So actually, Isabel is the youngest.
That's annoying. Yeah, if only I was this talented when I was 21. This is really lovely. It's a beautiful collection. I absolutely love the light, the slight movement. It's almost like real light when it has movement. So I loved bringing that idea to a table lamp. It's just everything about it. I really love it, and I think it has potential to be. You should see where you can get this produced potentially, or do a small batch. It'd be interesting to have it as something beyond a school project. My only comment is the counterweight at the bottom. It looks a little bit big compared to visually, and I know it probably had to be the same a certain size for the weight. So I don't know if it's possible for it to be another material, so it could be a little bit smaller. Yeah. But again, it's just like a small detail. The table is lovely. I love like the joinery details is really beautiful. I love the detailing of the leather and it being reversible if you want it to be more subtle than all wood. The little kind of tool or container inside, the brass detail on that is lovely. It's a really, really beautiful piece. The ceramics, I really like the idea of combining the ceramics, but the shapes on the ceramics to me are not as strong as the rest of the collection. But again, I'm happy that they're there. I think it's given like the concept that you were talking about, it kind of brings it all together. Yeah, it's really beautiful.
Thanks. I do agree with you about the counterweight situation. It's a bit large, and honestly, the first attempt was smaller. It just wasn't heavy enough, and that one it's actually hollow and filled with steel. So there could be other solutions to that. I wasn't able to find lead shot. I only found steel shot. So perhaps that would have been a better solution. But nonetheless, it can be kind of worked up. I think there's a few other small concerns that need to be more iterations to it. But
yeah, I think that's a natural part of the design process.
Totally.
Like when we're designing collections, there's so many prototypes that we go through, and there's reviews like this where a larger group sees it and you kind of see the reaction and seeing how people interact with it, and from there you kind of get ideas of where to take it next. And I think it's a necessary and natural part of the design.
For sure.
For it to keep evolving.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is it a dimmer at the top?
It is, if you think about it hard enough.
Okay.
It's supposed to be. Somewhere in the line of ordering parts, I got something mixed up and it doesn't work. But yes, it will be.
Since I'm holding this mic, one thing I just want to comment on, and if there are any lower years still out there listening, I think that your presentation you didn't go into all your process, that's fine. You have the process documents. You did not need to do that today. But I think what was really, really successful about your presentation is how you did outline how you addressed through your actual objects, the criteria that you set out on this project. And I think over this year, that is really where your maturity, despite your age, has shown itself, that you, you seem, the introspection you have about yourself and how you have meditated on your own thoughts and feelings through your own photography study have really shone through this work that you've developed. Like, it's been really incredible watching you reflect. Your reflections are so profound. And at some point we'll get all those process documents up, and I really recommend everybody have a close look at Jordan's, because it really is really, really well considered and well done. The thought that you put in, even if like some people's projects were really conceptual driven, and perhaps yours was a little bit more straight ahead, but it's the depth of thought that you put into every decision you made, and it really shows itself in this piece. So well done.
Thank you. I would like to think it's kind of a reflection of myself in a way. So.
It very much is.
I would agree. It is a reflection of you, and the fact that you have essentially entitled your project "Stillness," and rendering stillness as an active thing is kind of hard, but it's also such a kind of key part of how you interact with furniture. And this particular piece of furniture and collection of objects. And I kind of link it, in the concept of achieving that stillness by achieving a kind of mindfulness. And that's something that is it's a trope at this point. I mean, everyone is concerned about being mindful, but I think the idea of trying to achieve stillness is really interesting, especially in terms of the activities that you might engage in on this surface. And it's almost as though you are enforcing a being in the moment. And there isn't enough space on this desk to make it messy, right? So you've got, you're going to do one activity at a time consciously with the Jordan brand stillness, and that's so you're enforcing a kind of behavior, but you're suggesting it by the nature of the object. And so if this becomes the prescription that you give, sort of like forest bathing or something, there's a power to the piece of furniture that allows that to come through, and that can only happen if the details and the materials and the thought behind it is backed up with that personal awareness of stillness. It's not something you can fake, and it may seem precious overly on occasion. It may seem privileged, but it's a philosophical standpoint that you've had the whole time that you're in the program, and it's here in this object that you see that most fully realized. And so I think we've talked many times about the various decisions you've made and how comprehensive they are for you, and that's just again, it's to echo what Audrey said. Just watching that growth and development is really, really amazing. And yeah, I wish my life could accommodate the level of stillness that you're presenting. That's all. Yeah. Okay, so we have up next and our final presenter, Gwen Allenford. So let's carry on.
Yeah, thank you everyone for sitting through all these presentations. Short way to go, and we're almost there. So my name's Gwen, and just to give a little context before I start talking about my actual pieces, figuring out what I wanted to do for my project began with the desire to inject storytelling and narrative into my design process. I've always been fascinated with religious craft objects and how they're used in people's homes to communicate ideas and values to home dwellers. I come from a pretty large extended family with Muslim, Jewish, and Catholic backgrounds. So despite my own immediate household being atheist, I grew up around many symbolic objects and ornaments by extension. And I'm attracted to the visual symbols and cues that stem from more elaborate stories and myths. So for my project, I wanted to harness this way of injecting meaning into the home through the methodology of taking a story, extracting a symbol from it, and turning it into craft. So the title of my project is Roommates. So the stories I'm using are about common, strange, and oftentimes futile struggles we have from living with and sharing space with others. The connection between furniture and roommates is apparent when you think of the home environment as an observer of roommate dynamics. So this project takes this concept, the home as the observer, as an opportunity to design residential furniture that reflects the universal struggles of home life back to residents. And this is a way of engaging with the essential human problem of learning to live with each other well. The visual style of my pieces emerged from my interest in using humor to build out each design. I looked to artists and designers like Gaetano Pesci and Nicola L. for examples of work that referenced Memphis and pop art through their graphic and colorful styles, and who also engaged with psychology and a study of social dynamics within their designs. So each of the pieces that I have to show today utilize symbol, humor, and color to illustrate a story about roommates. So the first piece is called The Blue Heart. It draws on a story about my grandma losing her grandpa, her roommate of over 50 years. So it's the theme of isolation and of losing a roommate. The symbol I extracted from this story is a blue heart, as my grandma told me at my grandpa's funeral 14 years ago this month. My lover has died and my heart is blue. So the first mock-up pictured here addresses multiple design decisions I faced in the early stages. At this point, I hadn't yet settled on a 5-tone shade of blue. So this is kind of what I'd call like a boys' dorm room blue. Covers the entire shade, exterior and interior. And it has a latex paint finish and just a simple semi-gloss lacquer applied to this first mock-up. The light source is also an early iteration that's since been adapted to a more conventional LED strip lighting in the final piece. But most importantly, I think the biggest change from this mock-up to the final light is that I had clipped the wings where the shade meets the ground, anticipating that I would weight the front so that the crisp line that runs along the top of the piece would sit parallel to the floor. But once I put this whole mock-up together and stepped back, it became extremely clear that that's the wrong decision, and the piece should be allowed to sit and rest where it naturally wants to on the floor. It does rock because it is that curve, and so I extended the curve the whole way through the piece for the final iteration. And the specific shade of blue that I did ultimately settle on for this piece is a pigment called Prussian blue, which has a long history of different uses in art and in science. And a particularly lovely use was its early function in photography for an old printmaking method called cyanotypes. And the wonderful element that ties this element to my project is that the pigment would fade over time. And while for my final piece, the paint itself will not fade, it will remain saturated on the outside and then a more diluted version of Prussian blue on the interior. I just wanted to give that insight into the intentionality behind each decision that I was trying to make for my pieces. I think the scale is also an important part to this piece. It is quite large for practicality reasons. I understand it might have made more sense to scale it down, fit in a smaller space. But insofar as my pieces, I think, are walking the line between functional furniture and household objects and also art, I didn't want to sacrifice too much of my concept, being that this piece is filling the void of a lost roommate. And so it sort of takes up that space as a roommate itself. Here are just some technical drawings. From nose to tip, the whole piece is 48 inches long. It's about 15 inches off the ground, so it is rather substantial for a floor light. It's also what I call tertiary lighting, as the shade is completely opaque. So it doesn't provide all that much ambience up and out. It's strictly directed towards the floor and creates a bit of a beam actually of light across the floor. Okay. Oh yeah, and quickly, because it's not easy to see on the actual piece I have here today, the diffuser that's incorporated in this piece that covers the LED strip lighting is a piece of frosted acrylic that fits into a groove that was righted out on the interior of the shades. That just illustrates that for everyone. Okay, and the next piece that I have here is called the Comfy Vermin Chair, which speaks to the theme of disgust and repulsion for a roommate. And here's the short writing that accompanies this piece. This one's for the mice and all the roommates who are made to feel like vermin, and for all the roommates who are vermin. The mouse symbol very quickly brings this feeling of disgust to the forefront, so I troubleshooted how best to portray this symbol, and ultimately rejected the hyper-literal mouse silhouette in these early iterations, and settled on a little bump that evokes that feeling of disgust. I have a strong memory of lying in bed at night as a kid and listening to the pattering of mouse feet along the pipes in the ceilings of my parents' house, and the specific feeling of my hair on the back of my neck standing on end as I imagined one crawling into bed with me as I slept. So these pieces do tap into specific memories to draw stories from, and then also extract symbols from. So that's how I settled on this kind of bed form with a duvet slip that fits over this piece and evokes the feeling of that clashing of, or contrast of comfort and disgust. Yeah. So, but in the end, I hope this piece encourages reflection about our most reactionary and base emotions like disgust and how we get along or don't with those we live with. So lastly, I just have some of the construction method for this piece. So the exterior slip is a quilted duvet cover made up of individual squares that were sewn together, filled with polyfill. I tried to sew as many squares together as possible before actually filling them for ease of sewing. And we can get a little more into that maybe in question and answer. The last thing I'll say about this piece before I have a little demo of it is that the interior is entirely foam. There's no wood construction to this piece. I was really inspired by a piece of furniture from the 60s called the Togo sofa by Michel Ducheron, and he uses 3 different grades of foam, compression foam, to create structure, rigidity, but also comfort in the final piece. So there's a lot to say about resiliency and compression and foam, but we don't have to get into all of that unless people have specific questions. The final element for this piece is that it is meant to interact with the user in some way. So there is a slit at the back that's not sewn together, so you can wrap the whole thing onto the user. Oh, should I stop sharing maybe? Great. Okay, so what I've done is I've flipped the whole duvet onto itself, and what it reveals is the interior, which is the foam, rectilinear foam structure that's been upholstered in a more fitted fashion with some heavyweight industrial felt, which also kind of mimics the like 70s bedding where everyone just laid felt quilts on top of themselves. Yeah, so I'll leave it there and open it up for everybody else to talk. Thank you. Sure, yeah, they were sewn before the fill was entered into each square. So it's just a simple pocket basically. And so there's material on the inside of each square that backs a little extra space for more fill, just to fill that pocket in there. But you're welcome to sit on it too. The other thing is like this whole slip is quite rigid and it's kind of like 2-in-1. Like I think you could actually take this whole slip off, bundle it up and have it as extra seating almost. Like it's quite structural. It's almost like an exoskeleton actually.
What were your decisions around?
Yeah. Yeah.
Gwen, what were your decisions around like where you decided to leave the edge raw? Because it's not just on the backside, there are some raw edges to the exterior.
Yeah, so a lot of planning went into this piece, obviously, but a lot was also kind of left into the experimental final fabrication. And what I found when I was sewing up the whole quilt was that I was able to pre-sew a bunch of seams, but then it became more complicated once I had to fill some of those pockets to then bring those filled squares to the sewing machine and run them through. And I also found, this kind of was a perfect moment because I also found that the whole thing coming together almost wasn't enough discussed. Like, I think I didn't want to go over the line too much. I know we talked a lot about this over the year about how to stretch that feeling and how much is, just the right amount of visceral disgust that you feel and how much is, just to strike a good balance, basically. So I left some edges raw to try and just emphasize that part of the whole concept.
Why did you choose disgust and loss as the two things that you wanted to focus on?
I think that they were just the most memorable stories in my mind. Like I did a lot of creative writing for this project. And so I had a number of different stories. I have so many other directions I'd like to take this project, really. Another story or narrative that's really strong for me is the topic of sharing material goods. And like, I grew up with a sister and we would always fight over clothes. So I think that there's a good something in there. But these were just extracted from a lot of creative writing and the ones that rang the most true and seemed to be the best that I could execute for this project. Yeah.
I like the mice that are running throughout it, and I picked up on that before you said anything too. I thought, oh my gosh, she's got mice in there. it's quite an animated little feature. Cats would love this chair too.
I think what I've enjoyed most about watching this come together is the correspondence between drawing and making, and like the work itself has the sort of sketched quality of your drawings, and you're in there and the ideas are in there. So it's just really nice to not see it like so perfected, like beyond the sort of natural quality of the drawing, because that's not really the point of the object, right? And I was wondering too about the light, like the beam is so effective, and I think it ties really nicely into this idea of losing someone and sort of the, like you can see people in the light kind of thing, like when light has this kind of spiritual quality, and especially with this very defined beam. I'm wondering, I can't remember, like, was that beam of light something that you kind of controlled over time? Was it like a discovery along the way? Did you, like, obviously you knew there'd be light, but like how connected were you to like the forming of that tapered beam?
Yeah, it was a discovery. I have so many different mock-ups and versions of this light. And yeah, that was a total just something that came about the making process, and that I felt amplified actually the vulnerability that this piece has in its close connection to the ground and in not expanding beyond that and actually speaking to the rest of the room. Like, it is sort of like that, it emphasizes that feeling of isolation and closeness to, wanting to be a little closer to the earth and comforted when you lose someone.
Did the angle change at all between the first prototype? Yeah, like it opened up or closed? Or?
Yeah, that was also refined. Like the ideation process for this piece, as everyone else knows, but sorry, Bahar, like my project, that piece in particular changed quite a bit over the course of this year. It was initially erected vertically as a very clear symbol of a heart. And I think now it's got a much more ubiquitous quality, or not ubiquitous, ambiguous quality to it. Some people read it like a teardrop, and there's other ways to read it. But settling on this form was through a number of paper studies, folding paper, and seeing how it interacted, and just changed how people interact with the piece. So, yeah. I don't know if that answers your question.
That was a real surprise to see the change from December to here, because this is the first time I've seen it. And
yeah.
I think it's a great direction that you went in. It's just a bit more abstracted, and it just makes it really beautiful. It sheds the light in a really wonderful way. It's just much more subtle.
Yeah, I think the light is lovely. I'm glad that you didn't do the vertical format. I think it's a lot more special like this. When I first saw it with the lights on, I was worried about what kind of mood lighting you would provide, given that it's facing down. But when they turned off the lights, I thought that was a nice effect. I actually like this kind of almost runway, like a very crisp runway it creates. It's a nice effect. I think it's beautiful, and I love that it takes up space. Maybe I'm biased, but I'm really okay with, like, you know, furniture taking up space in the house. I think it's nice for things to have a presence. So I think it's beautiful. The story behind it is really beautiful. I think you're really good at telling a story with both pieces. I kind of really related to the story that you were saying, and it really kind of makes everything, you know, more impressive when you have like a story, and just the way you presented it too. I really like kind of the visual way you presented the story in your presentation as well. And it wasn't long, it was very short, but we got the point. The chair is also really cool. I like that it, you know, you even said you can take this off and like use it as a separate thing. The mice I didn't get at all until you talked about it, but I was like, oh, the bumps are cool, you know. I didn't really understand what's going on, but that's okay. It doesn't, you know, it's still like an interesting visual, even if you don't kind of pick up that the mouse story. Yeah, it's nice. I like that both pieces are kind of like big and unapologetic about the scale. I think that makes them more, that makes it more effective.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it was probably one of your goals, and that was very successfully achieved, that you wanted to come up with this methodology for working and using the power of the narrative as a device to ideate, basically. And I think these pieces are really successful. And what is successful about them is that even if I don't know the stories, there's a lot you can take from either one. You can plant your own narrative, which is nice when a work has that open-ended quality, right? I can suppose my own narrative on the light. The light in particular is probably more well resolved in some ways because you went through more iterations of it. Not that the chair is not successful, because it's very comfortable and I could sit there for a long time. I just don't know personally if I need the mice. I think that you've only scratched the surface, frankly, on the potential of the chair. I think the way the quilting and the bed, you know, has been approached is so lovely and so like extra luxe comfort. Like, I just think there's more to be approach that could get to that idea of vermin or disgust, because if the central theme there is disgust, maybe it's something that's made out of all or used rags, or maybe it's the coloring of the fabric, or like, you know, it doesn't necessarily have to do actually with vermin. I know they're part of the story, but I don't know if they need to be there, you know. And then finally, I think you could also play with the slip cover. You mentioned Gaetano Pesce, you know, with his work. I think about those chairs where, you know, the fabric folds right over, and you have the slit at the back, but maybe you need 2 more slits, or maybe the sides are slitted so they're like arms, so the chair in itself can really the comforter on the chair can really surround, anyway, so all I'm saying is there's so much more potential to be explored with this. Like I could see, like probably many of you in the room, how you could develop a collection if you were to do an exhibit, if the world ever writes itself, right? You could have a series of upholstered furniture that could engage with the users in different ways, that all could reflect a narrative, right? So anyway, well done.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, so thank you.
I want to add one thing about the finish on the light. I think if it was a bit more matte, because right now it's picking up. Also, we're in a very bright room right now, but I think it would work better if it was matte. Because right now it's like the way it's reflecting some of the other lights could be distracting. And to Kirsten's point, the chair right now, to me, it's more of kind of an installation piece. But if you think about something like this, because there's a lot of examples from the 70s of really successful sofas. If you think about, I don't know if you're familiar with the Mario Bellini sofa, B&B Italia just relaunched it. And it's been such a successful classic piece. People are just obsessed with it. And it's basically a simple thing like this. And it becomes like this whole modular system. So it definitely has potential if you polish it a little bit and kind of tone down some aspects of it being, a successful product.
Yeah, thank you. Right, I totally.
I think in a sense, I agree with Kirsten that the mice are maybe unnecessary, and I love that. Of course, it's totally weird and totally perfect, and I think the unnecessariness perhaps of the whole thing is also very telling in a sense of how you straddle in this way, being so thoughtful in your approach and your making and who you are as a person, and also letting these pieces get away from you a little bit. And that's been a new experience, at least for me, watching you this year, that tension that you've lived in and occupied, maybe sometimes more successfully than others because tension's uncomfortable. But looking back really well, you let yourself run with these explorations and with mice and writing and drawing and all of those things. And you're also able to really thoughtfully pull that back and pare that down to this little 5-minute description that gave us absolutely everything we could need to know and made us want to know more. And that's, I guess, the tension that I'm talking about, and that tension of letting materials lead and pulling back. And you've done a lot of that this year, and that's not an easy place to live in, and not an easy thing to feel, and not an easy thing to make. And yeah, it's neat to see that tension come to life in a way that's really well resolved. And I respect that a lot.
Thank you.
I respect your ability to stay in the tension there.
Thank you.
I'm going to add, because I have a comment here, just one last comment for me. The diffuser is really well done. And it's important because it's such a simple piece. It's so clean. So, well done taking it to that level of detail. It is important to see just how cleanly that diffuser. So it's a little, I didn't see the one end where the light was just kind of popped, but the front when I was just peeking in was great. Nicole had a comment online here. You have communicated some complicated ideas into a very well executed objects. I'm so impressed. The heart is a home run. The physicality it has as it relates to your concept and the resolution of using the heart as a symbol in such a poignant way. Also, this feeling of nostalgia and this kind of hyper-real folding a heart in half to cut it out to get two symmetrical sides, beyond a symbol, but also as a gesture.
Thanks, Nicole. She was my mentor at the beginning of the year as well, so helped me talk through a lot of these ideas.
Just a quick comment. I'm just loving this light, and it just a quick kind of like roommate's story is that when I, just relating to your design decision to lighten the shade on the inside, it's really smart, and it's also, it's beautiful and smart. Like the house I grew up in was right next to a big brick house. There was a dark alley, so there was never any light there. And then when they tore it down and rebuilt the house next to us, the architects made a conscious decision to make that wall white so that we, as their neighbors, had all this reflected light. So anyways, that's more about me, but this is back to your light, just saying that it like everything you have here reminds me of certain little things, and the storytelling translates fully, and it goes beyond what you put into it, which is quite an achievement.
Thanks, Dave.
That's exactly what you should hope for, that, whether people get your narratives, that they're, again, reading their own narratives into pieces.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
And not to get too far down this rabbit hole, but I don't know how much the connection between religious craft objects and symbols resonates with everyone. But for me, as someone who didn't grow up with religion but was surrounded by it, I looked at those symbols and thought, I don't know the story behind them, but they're so meaningful to the people I know are associated with them. So similarly with these pieces, not everyone will understand the story or know the story or resonate with that is behind each one. But ultimately, it's about social connectivity and learning to live with each other well. So, yeah.
Yeah, David, when you said storytelling, all of a sudden, these two pieces just completely made way more sense to me than when they were titled Roommates. I mean, Roommates is one story.
Yes, yeah.
Right? But if it's not the story that resonates with you, in a broader sense, this is really storytelling.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely.
But I think there's something about the double entendre about roommates, also the idea that it's the things that you live with as objects, and that the people you live with as circumstances and people that are fraught, which I think is a nice way to tie it together. And at the start in your presentation, when you drew a link between story to symbol to craft, you pretty much could have just stopped talking right there,
right.
Because that's what you presented, which is really a nice kind of connection. I was really intrigued by your use of Prussian blue as a color and evoking the history of that color and its usage in so many different ways. And in your process document, you talked about the fact that the inside color is a 20%, reduction, 20 times lighter, but it's the same color.
Yeah.
And the idea of that fading over time from a dark color to a light color. And then when Bahar was mentioning the reflectivity on one side, creating a much brighter color, and then the dark side, it literally was like two sides of the moon, because it was a very different color on the shady side. So there's, I think there's so much to play with the history of color, but also the way you handle it and the way you work with it.
Yeah.
And there's an intensity to those colors. I think of like the work of Anish Kapoor, who, is very famous for working with very particular shades of color, right down to basically trademarking, a particular color that no one else can use in the world. And that's, controversial in itself. But I think the idea of the fading or the gradual degrading, I think, is a kind of a key part of any context of symbolism, and whether it strengthens or weakens over time. I really like when all the lights were off and the light was rocking and the beam was wider at the center, and then it narrowed and then got wider through that activity. So the way it changes is really quite amazing.
Thanks.
Yeah.
We're at 6.
You're just trying to plug that in somewhere. Am I down to nothing on my percentage? Okay. With your comfy Vermin chair, it's so conflicting because it feels very much like a work in progress on some levels, because of the the inconsistency of the way that it's made. And that's probably more me than anything else. I would totally agree about the idea of having more folds or flaps that could move and make it act in the way you want it to. But rather than mice inside, I sort of see them as boils or goiters or evidence of disease, which again, I mean, we can't get away from this fucking thing, right? It's like it's everywhere.
Sorry.
And that's nothing, it's a response that we have to have. And so I think there's something about that is also very interesting, because it takes a three-dimensional form and makes it hyper three-dimensional. And I wonder if those quilted squares could be maybe a little less poofy, but then they wouldn't respond to all of the illustrative qualities that you've put into all of your previous work. You're really rendering what you had drawn in almost a cartoon fashion. And that's laudable in itself. And that's where that concept of story to symbol to craft comes. And so I think it's entirely supportable as a result. But I think your experience of being surrounded by symbolic imagery and yet not really engaging or understanding it until the time is right for your life to do so, I think that's a kind of familiar thing for people. And I think we all can really benefit from that journey that you've gone on to see what it is in ourselves that resonate with things around us. And that this particular project has captivated me from the start, because you did all the hard stuff to make it explicable as to why it was important. And I kind of really grew through the process as well. So I wanted to kind of thank you for that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could talk about my theme all day. It means a lot to me. But ultimately this year was very experimental and playful for me. So I really appreciate all the feedback, and that everyone can see where these pieces could go if they were to be developed further. And yeah, thank you for all the feedback.
Well done, everybody. Woohoo! Congratulations. What fantastic work. And I'm going to pinch a final comment from Scott Unson, who was with us at the Christmas or at the end of the first term crit. It's always really nice to see in this program that there's sort of, I think his word that he always uses, no doctrine, that every project here is unique. Like there's not a school of philosophy that's coming out of this school. It's really lovely to see that all of the projects have really reflected you each individually. You were truly on your own journeys this year, which is really fantastic, and I feel privileged to have been a part of it. So well done. Fantastic.
Yeah, we call it the anti-Eindhoven.
I guess I'd also like to thank our guests very much. Bahar, thank you very, very much for coming. You want to share anything else? You don't have to. Well, you should, just because the people who are following at home.
Thanks for having me. This was honestly like such a nice, inspiring day. It's such an amazing group. I loved seeing your work. I loved seeing kind of the bond and relationship you have with each other. And, it's just like a nice throwback to school times. So thanks for giving me that opportunity.
Well, thank you so much for coming. Rob, it is so nice to have you here and hear your sage words in this critique. I think everybody benefited from your keen interest with this group. So thank you so much. and Connie, who always comes and is like so dedicated, as you guys know, to all of you. So thanks so much, Connie. And again, fantastic group. I really wish we could go out and have several drinks and really celebrate as we should, but we can't do that, unfortunately. We'll have to another time. Yeah. Anyway, final words about cleanup, anything practical like that, Peter?
No, there's nothing practical left to say, I think. Yeah, I think we've got to set a date for some kind of party. And unfortunately, it's kind of unrealistic to set a date, but let's just make sure that that happens as soon as we can. I would say as soon as the patios are open, we will make something happen. And Christina had a great idea where we could even just go to, Trinity Bellwoods Park with a few bottles of wine at some point when we can, safely do that. So I think we definitely need a celebration, and it's a celebration of this amazing achievement, not just of this year, but the 4 years. And it's so hard to look back over those 4 years with any level of understanding about where that time went. Except that I know, your calloused hands and brains probably have all of the indents to prove it. Yeah, thanks so much for these 4 years, and we look forward to seeing all the final photographs of everything when you get an opportunity to present that at the online graduate exhibition that we will be mounting. And
I believe there's a meeting for that this Saturday. Am I right? It's in the calendar. Okay.
Yeah, don't look at these guys for corroboration right now.
One last late coming in congratulations from Andrew Resor. To everybody, congratulations to all you guys. You should be very proud of what you have achieved. Exciting to watch and listen to you present today. Mel Wright also says congratulations, y'all. So much love. And Ian B, super talented and supportive group. It's been so inspiring watching all of you work and create over the last 2 years. So there we go. All right. Oh, and then process documents should be, sorry, David, process documents. They should be arriving when you guys are doing studio cleanup on Monday or Tuesday. 1 copy's for us, 1 copy's for you. I can't wait to see them like in my hands, even though I've looked at them because they are really fantastic. Well done.
Just a very brief thank you on behalf of everyone in the class to our guests and also to our instructors for an amazing year and obviously an amazing 4 years. I think in a week I'll figure out that it's all over, but right now it's just time to sleep, I guess.